So my question to just start this conversation, why take the time to write Digital Money Demystified right now?
Oh boy, I got so tired. First of all, as a law professor, I teach blockchain, crypto, and the law, and obviously engaging with the next wave of lawyers is fun. I'm fully immersed in that. But the idea of reaching a broader audience of folks who don't necessarily have a tech or finance background really got wrecked at the height or the cliff that we recently experienced with the latest bear market. And it was so much misinformation, disinformation, information that we call FUD or fear, uncertainty, and doubt. And also so much FOMO. Every time there's a price pump, you're going to see a lot of folks come in who are less interested in learning what's underneath the hood and more about how to make a quick buck or Satoshi, as the case may be. And I just wanted to find a track in between the carnival barkers and the naysayers to really separate fact from fiction so that people have the clarity they need to make informed decisions. And I was doing a lot of speaking engagements. I have my own weekly podcast as well, Tech Intersect. And I thought it was a good idea to sit down, create an evergreen book that focuses on the myths, not necessarily the technology. Of course, the tech and laws, regulations change almost every day, but the myths persist. And I wanted to get at the heart of that to give people a solid foundation in a safe space and place to learn from a trusted voice and then to make their own decisions.
I appreciate the idea of FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt, because it's often fear of the unknown that holds many people back from at least being curious, learning. And I think if we can just come away from this conversation with an open mind of what are the possibilities, but also being well informed of the misunderstandings, the misinformation, the misconceptions that are holding people back, even financial brand leaders who are listening right now. What are these? What are the big misconceptions that people have in the present moment around digital money?
I think one of the top ones, I'm sure you hear this a lot, and you see it from the sensational headlines and the actual headlines, hashtag Sam Bankman-Fried, about crypto, and lumping everything in, which is also a myth. Crypto is all just for criminals, a fad. All of it is a scam. It is wholly unregulated, too volatile, which was an interesting bit of research that I did for the book to kind of challenge my own assumptions and misperceptions about volatility, that crypto may be just for a unique and specific set of people. So not kind of for a more diverse and well-informed and accessible area of finance, maybe just a tech bro or a crypto bro, whatever that is. And so there are a lot of misconceptions and misperceptions and misconceptions about who's involved, what crypto is, the fact that we have over 30 or 40,000 different types of coins and tokens. And of course, that doesn't even include NFTs, et cetera. So really pushing back against the perception that this is wholly criminality and for purposes of the book, just leaning into companies like Chainalysis and others that do really extensive blockchain forensics to be able to actually follow the money. Like a public permissionless blockchain is a terrible place to engage in persistent criminal activity. And Chainalysis reports, even as recently as this year, say that less than 2% of crypto asset use is used in the engagement of illicit activity. And final point, the almighty dollar is actually the number one currency still being used in criminal activity. And I'm not burning my dollars, although they could probably print more. And I suspect you're not burning your dollars either. So kind of separating fact from fiction about the why, the what, and the where is one of the first parts of pushing past those fears that you mentioned.
This is fascinating because perception creates reality. And if all you're hearing is the bad, the negative, crypto's only for criminals, well, that becomes your reality. Perspective is the sum of context and framing. But I think for context here, for those who are listening or for those who are watching, we've been here before. Let's go back to 1994. That was the year that the internet reached the mass consciousness of humanity. And it's interesting in hindsight, we can go back. There was Paul Krugman. He was a 2008 Nobel Memorial Prize for Econ Sciences. He wrote in 1998, so 4 years after 94, he said, by 2005 or so, it will become clear that the internet's impact on the economy has been no greater than the fax machine. Well, here we are almost 30 years later, and I'm seeing history repeat itself, but it's not just with the internet. Obviously, you now have digital currency, digital money, which can be then subdivided into these different buckets. But you also have this whole other AI capability. And when people's perception, and working with executive and senior leadership teams, I ask them, well, what's your perception of like AI or Chat GPT? Well, that's what kids are going to just use to cheat in school. And that's what they're hearing over and over and over again. So what's the story behind the story, if you will? Let's demystify some of this. What's the difference between quote unquote crypto and NFTs, and then maybe even going down the whole idea of decentralized autonomous organizations? I mean, that's a whole other rabbit hole. Let's break these down, because people might have, is that an understanding? They have knowledge, they have awareness, but they don't have understanding, and there's a difference between the two.
Yeah, so much of that it may even fit into the quadrant that folks don't know that they don't know. Right. So to your earlier point, you see a headline, you see an acronym, and maybe it's clickbait worthy. You read a couple of sentences, and then the person knows everything there is to know, so that they can reject it out of hand.
Right.
Which I think is at a very basic level, just fundamentally, I want to use the word lazy. It sounds like a judgment charged word, but I think it comes from my just natural curiosity, my focus on intellectual curiosity, lifelong learning.
Yes.
And, always wanting to be intellectually curious, but also I'm a lawyer and I'm a tenured law professor. I have a co-hire appointment at the Penn State Institute for Computational and Data Sciences. Like, I get that part, but there's a certain fundamental cautious curiosity about the impact that technology at least can have on your existing area of expertise. So you mentioned 3 areas: crypto assets more broadly, non-fungible tokens, DAOs or decentralized autonomous organizations. I was the chair of the Maker Foundation, so that's how I cut my chops on the DeFi side. And just at a high level, when we even think of cryptographically secured assets, where does the term crypto comes from? Because cryptocurrency is a bit of a misnomer to me. I'd be interested in your thoughts. But cryptography has been around for a long time. The idea to encrypt messaging.
Yes.
Used in times of war, or if you have to move information from one place to another, that has been around for millennia, dare I say, in some form or fashion. Obviously, it's digitized now, right?
Yeah.
And then you take the idea of currency, the ability not only to exchange information using, again, existing technology, peer-to-peer networks. Used to be used for file sharing. For those who are listening or will listen, that's like, I have air quotes because I'm an IP lawyer. So some of it was copyright theft. It's fine. That's a story for another day. But now we can use peer-to-peer technology to exchange value, not just information, and obviously leveraging the internet to do that in a novel way to organize and protect that data when you're thinking about the data of transactions and balances. And that brings us to blockchain, right?
I want to pause you here, because I think that's such an important point. You brought the internet back up. All of this comes back to 94 when we're talking these different types of quote unquote digital currencies, because they're built on the back of the internet. And if you think about, for example, I want to pause on currency That right
Yeah.
there. Because I was having this conversation with a board of directors the other day, and they were asking, well, what about what were my thoughts on crypto? And I said, well, I don't want to go down too far into that rabbit hole because it would have taken us off track for that particular discussion. But they're like, I don't get it. How can something be intangible and it has value? And I go, well, what is money to begin with in the first place? It's just the store of value. And it's an agreed upon value. There's some value there, because if we go back to kind of the dawn of time, seashells has stored the value, and you could exchange your seashells for some other physical, tangible good. What has happened, though, since 94, Peter Diamandis has written about this, is physical assets have been digitized. And when they get digitized, they get decentralized. When they get decentralized, they get democratized. When they get democratized, they get demonetized. So the whole elements transform. I mean, even you're talking IP. That's what happened in the music industry. 1999, the rise of Napster, built on the back of the internet 5 years later. So I just want to pause for a little bit more context here, that money is just a store of value, and it's an agreed upon value here. And maybe it's because it's intangible, but then you can make the argument, well, what's backing the dollar? Because we went off the gold standard. So there's that whole conversation.
Right.
Where do we go from here to try to gain some clarity around things like cryptocurrency, non-fungible tokens, DAO, all of that? And how do they all fit together so that we can at least get clarity into, okay, this is where we're at. This is where we've been. This is where we're at right now in the present moment. Where do we go from here? So let's come back to the present moment and get some context of where we're at right now.
Yeah, this is a really, hopefully this is going to be a helpful question for us to explore, because I had to sit with that question myself. Early on, I entered the space like 2017. It was at the time the proliferation of the ICO boom and bust, right? And it's like, what's the point? What is the point of this magic internet money, right? And is it going to put into question my 4 licenses to practice law in New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and DC? Like, I'm not interested. But then I started to explore all of the different ways or options that we have to exchange value depending upon your present needs. Sometimes I have physical cash. Sometimes I have the equivalent of that in another country's currency through some type of foreign exchange. Sometimes I use my credit card. Sometimes I use Zelle. Sometimes I use PayPal, Venmo, Cash App. Sometimes I'm sending a wire. Sometimes if I could find my checkbook, it could be a check, whatever that is, right? All of the different options and opportunities depending upon what your needs are in the moment. And also to distinguish, which is something I had to sit with and learn, between government issued currency and other forms of value that one would agree upon and recognize, to your point of cowrie shells, sugar, salt, the laundry list goes on, the unfortunate, horrible scourge of enslavement that had bodies as property. There have been a lot of things throughout the history of time where people agreed upon a value for exchange. And this will be the next wave of it. And I think it's so important for many reasons. One, because we have many borders in the world. There's so much going on in the world, not to make this a political statement per se, but money is politics in many respects, because governments issue that for many reasons, some of which have to do with the protection of borders. But imagine this world where the monetary system and value is not beholden to a particular border.
It's borderless.
Borderless, which makes it really, really powerful in times when we're seeing revolutionary and evolutionary change to an increasingly globalized society. So I think that's critically important as well.